All right, I think we will get started. So hello, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of Samvera Connect 2022. I am Carolyn Casey. You might have seen me present the state of Samvera. I'm currently the chair of the Samvera board. I will be hosting today's conference sessions. So thanks for joining. Some housekeeping, please note this webinar does have live closed captioning available. Simply click on the closed captioning button at the bottom of the Zoom window. The conference is being recorded. We'll post the full day video as soon as we can. Next week, we're going to have the edited sessions for easier viewing and sharing. So today's plenary sessions are just under 3 hours. There's going to be a 10-minute break after our project updates, and then we'll also have a 10-minute break at 1:20. That's Eastern time. We also have Birds of a Feather that will start at 2 p.m. Eastern time. These are 30-minute sessions. They're Zoom meetings, so don't stay in this webinar. You will go find those Zoom meetings on the schedule. There's concurrent ones, and we have volunteer facilitators for them. So again, the Zoom access for those will be on the schedule in the individual Bird of a Feather sessions. And we actually do still have some sessions available if you'd like to strike up a conversation around a topic tomorrow on which is Thursday. Oops, 3-legged stool. So everyone who registered for Connect did agree to follow our community guidelines and the code of conduct. The Samvera community guidelines express our values in the context of the everyday activities of the Samvera community and serve as the principles by which our members act and collaborate. They complement the code of conduct and the anti-harassment policy. The code of conduct expresses our expectations for respectful communication as we work and interact with one another. If you haven't already, please take the time to review these documents today. We expect participants at all community events and forums to honor these standards. Building on the framework provided by these documents, each Samvera community member has a role to play in creating and promoting a welcoming and safe community. If a situation arises that may represent a violation of our code of conduct or anti-harassment policy, and you feel that you cannot or should not address it alone, please contact a member of this year's program committee, a member of the Samvera board, or a helper. We are well positioned and prepared to assist you. The helpers today are listed on the screen. That's myself, Carolyn Casey, Hannah Frost, and Alicia Morris. And you can see the email here. It's helpers@samvera.org, and there's more info on the wiki about the process. So those were just a few of our housekeeping items, and we are starting with improving high racks bulk imports by customizing bulk racks. And this is presented by Emily Porter and Brad Watson, who are both, I am fairly certain I know you are both from Emory University Libraries. So I'm going to stop the share and mute myself and hand it over to you all.
Hey, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Hope everyone can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
Great. So I'm Emily Porter. I'm the Digital Repository Program Manager here at the Emory Libraries, and I'm here with Brad Watson, who's from our software engineering team. And we're going to talk about improving Hierarchs bulk imports by some customizations we've done with bulk racks, and specifically talking about ingesting digitized books in Hierarchs 3 and bulk racks. Also just wanted to give a thank you to the program committee. We're kind of a last minute addition due to a cancellation, and we are very glad to be here with you all. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our digitized book ingests, and then kind of reviewing this presentation and hearing some of the other conversations this week at Samvera Connect. I really wanted to mention also that what we're talking about today could really apply to any kind of work that has many file sets attached to it. And in our case, in order to meet some of our preservation goals for our repository, we have a local customization on our Hierarchs application that allows us to store multiple files per file set. And for our book objects, when they're digitized, we get quite a few files for each book. And that can include volume level files. We always have a PDF for the entire volume. Depending on the output of the process, we may also have an OCR file for the entire volume and a METS file for the entire volume. And then we also have page level files. So for each page, we store an image, typically a TIFF, and that's what we use in the universal viewer and our IIIF manifests. We also have a plain text output, and in some cases, an Alto XML file. And because we have all these, we really want to keep them. And we're hoping to use these as we start to get working with full text search, for example. And on the right side of my screen, I'm showing you, this is an example of what a file set page looks like in our application for a book object. And you can see the TIFF file is stored as kind of the preservation main file. Then we have that XML file for the Alto, which is the OCR data, and then the plain text as well. And so we're kind of talking about today is roughly defined as a typical book object. Obviously, books can vary quite a bit, but when we're talking about imports, where we have really struggled with ingest is when a book has more than 100 pages, for example. So kind of looking back at our averages over ingest for the last year, that more or less averages out to be about 170 file sets and approximately 500 files, again, with those multiple files per file set. I also want to mention that our digital collection backlog for ingest contains thousands of these already digitized books. So this is really something that we need to pay a lot of attention to. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, we've been stuck in the slow lane with this process. The image on my right is an unfortunate photo of traffic on Interstate 85 going into Atlanta. And this reminds me a lot of watching the Sidekick queue for a very slow ingest. And I think the number of lanes is kind of close to our number of workers. So when we're ingesting one of these book objects, that time can range from as little as 3 hours to as long as 9 days, depending on, again, how many file sets, how large the book is. And the crux of this problem is, and I'm sure that this is a pain point that many of you in the community are familiar with, in Hierarchs and Fedora, the more file sets that get added to a work, the slower that file set attachment process takes over the course of the import. And so we've researched this for years. We've done a lot of mining of prior Samvera Slack threads with other people dealing with this kind of problem. Some of the fixes that we've attempted are really scaling up our server resources for our Hierarchs server and our Fedora server. We've done some work to optimize Solr. We've also done some optimization on the number of Sidekick workers running concurrently and also the number of retries that happens for failed jobs. We pretty quickly realized we could only ingest one book at a time, and we still have to restart Fedora very frequently, several times a week on average. We've also been trying to upgrade our Hierarchs application to the latest stable 3.x series in the hopes that we might benefit from some of the other upgrades that have been happening over the last couple of years. And another thing that we've done is document very detailed statistics for each ingest. And that's allowed us to really get some insight into trying to predict how long it's going to take to ingest a book, for example. Next slide, please. So because we have these very detailed logs of our ingests, we're able to do some things like this graph. And I realize this may be a little hard to read, but what this is showing is kind of the correlation of the average file sets per hour that get processed relative to the number of file sets in the individual work. And so again, this is kind of a snapshot of book objects that have between 100 and close to 700 file sets. And you can really see this kind of the initial ingest for smaller books, that first, anywhere from 100 to 150 is where we see, okay performance. But then you can see this really terrible decline in the rate of ingest the more file sets that are attached to the work. So we kind of have an average maybe around 20, 25 or so for smaller books. And then it drops very far down. You can see at the right, that poor little dot at the right edge of the screen, which is showing for a work that has close to 700 pages, we're only averaging about 4 file sets per hour. So this is really unsustainable for us. And we've had a little bit of time this autumn to kind of go back and brainstorm some different ideas for what we could do next. Next slide, please. And so one thing that we identified was we'd heard a lot of good things about bulk racks in the community, and we wanted to give it a try and see what we could do relative to our customized ingest process. And I'll hand it over to Brad.
Hi, once again, my name is Brad Watson. I'm a software engineer here with Emory Libraries. And a little bit disclaimer up front about my slides. Later on, I will be venturing over to displaying code. And I know that's not pleasurable for some who are not in the tech side of things. And I will be mostly using it for just comparison. I'm mostly going to be talking about the strategy to use bulk racks and how to customize bulk racks. So the code that I'm going to be displaying will only really be for that's highlighting where the changes have happened and how the changes have happened. So earlier in the process, as Emily pointed out, the software engineering team here had a meeting to identify what the possible solutions to increasing the ingest rate of Hyrax objects would be. So we basically went from a situation where what's the easiest and requires the least amount of time to all the way up to what's the hardest and probably not the most probable. We've basically created a list here that you see now. Basically, the first one, which seemed to be the easiest, was bulk racks. And we also identified further down the line that we definitely need to go ahead and jump on the Hyrax upgrade, which we kind of did at the same time. But we realized that we needed to focus purely on bulk racks with one branch. And others that proved to be more difficult and required more time was to just purely dive into the log files of our jobs to see what was failing and pointing out those failures and trying to go through a needle in a haystack situation to see what was truly causing our problems. Onward over to investigating whether we need a whole different server, which I loved hearing the card method presentation earlier, as well as seeing if the newer Fedora versions coming down the pipeline that are not currently in our version of Hyrax would possibly solve our issues too. Of course, since that's in the pipeline, we couldn't really do anything with that. So we focused first on bulk racks, and it was minimal effort. We, as I kind of took lead on this situation, and we do have customizations. They're mostly in the file set actor as well as the attached files to work job. portions of the both high racks as well as bulk racks, and we were able to get it moving and going pretty easily. But we were still seeing a lot of the same issues. We were still seeing a high rate of failure when it came to file sets being either missing or orphaned. Derivatives and characterization were still not happening just in the same way as our previous imports were not happening. It took multiple re-ingests to go ahead and get all the file sets that we wanted to be attached to the work in there. But we also saw some new things coming up. Like, for example, the customization was flowing duplicates of the same file set into the our curate generic work instance. And we also noticed how the file sets weren't being inputted into the work in the order that we put it on the CSV file that we used to ingest. A lot of the same problems that we were having with our previous importer were showing up in bulk racks. And the kicker of it all is that we really didn't see a huge improvement with bulk racks. But bulk racks has some unexpected behaviors and benefits that came with the installation. The beauty of it all is that they're definitely a database object. Each entry, which includes the work as a file set, is a database object as well, and they retain not only details about the object that it creates, like the ID as well as a link to the ID, but it also retains errors relevant only to that entity. And we saw we saw some errors that were popping up that we weren't able to locate before for kind of for the first time. We saw that the major problem that was happening is that we were seeing failure to lock errors, which ties to the file set actor attached to work method. We were seeing a lot of those. And I apologize, this is where I'm going to go ahead and work away from the slides here and go ahead and show some code. Just to get an understanding too of the complications in this situation, I'm doing a side-by-side of our code here. And really all you have to really worry about is that over here, create content is a one-piece situation. It's a call over to uploaded file, and that's how each file set gets attached. We have a lot more processing on our side to the left. This is our code as of our current production curate, and this is just done for and this is kind of what creates the lockup as far as what we're concerned. What we found with and I apologize, I'm going to move things around a little bit here so I can easily access them. Apologies once more. What we saw is that we were getting a lot of these lock manager unable to acquire lock errors. And the way that bulk racks helped us in this situation is that, okay, we see this error, we're unable to acquire a lock. That means the work is getting persisted to. And we need to go ahead and improve the ability for the work to go ahead and be freed up to go ahead and receive each of these file sets and not absolutely get pounced upon, so that the improvement can help. This is kind of the indicator to us that we needed to work on our sidekick errors. So we did. We went ahead and worked with our queue to go ahead and optimize, give it the ability to go ahead and get just the right amount of import files. And we improved it, but we did not eliminate the issue. We still had these lock manager errors, even after playing around with the right mix of Sidekick jobs relative to, the ingest as well as the default setup. But realizing that, we also saw a whole batch of other errors. And this is more of a, this is purely just more of a preservation event, more of a logging situation, but it indicated to us that this wasn't working for some reason, and then we would need to debug this as well. So I found out that the reason why this was happening so often is that at the time that this was being run, the file set was not aware of the work and vice versa. It wasn't properly attached at that moment. Which gave me a clue to something else that was throwing a bug as well, which was that the file manager was throwing an error whenever we attempted to save. And we found out that that was also tied to the fact that we were having multiple file sets, a multiple of the same file set saved into the work. And what we did was, I just wanted to go ahead and figure out why that was happening. And in the process of doing that, I realized that all this does is that it sorts the AIDs and it injects it into the work. It works ordered members. This is doing that on the outside of the processing that you would see here, or more specifically, here. It basically is doing the same thing here, but it's doing it at a level where it has knowledge of all the file sets it needs to save in there, and it's replacing those file sets in order. That made me realize something. That made me realize that basically I wasn't understanding exactly the reason why the work wasn't being saved correctly and why the lock for the work wasn't coming through in a timely fashion. This is the hardest process that the work has to do during the whole attached to work process. So this is the one that takes the most amount of time, and this is what's causing the stopgap in this situation. If I can go ahead and persist all of the file sets in one straight go with the file manager, why can't I go ahead and do that at the end of the import and remove this process here and allow all of the work, all of the file sets to create beforehand? And I hacked after that point. I basically saw whether that was possible. If I took away any persistence to the work from this side, as far as bulk RAS is concerned, can I go ahead and put that to the very end, at the end of the whole process? And this is when I'll go ahead and get back into the presentation mode. And once again, I apologize, I have to move things around. There we are. So that's whenever we came to the point of the realization is that there is a very end job for bulk racks. It's called the schedule relationships job. It happens after every single other piece of every single other object is created and persisted and done with. And it ensures that by making sure that there's nothing else in the queue. If that's the case, why don't I hijack that procedure? Why don't I throw in a job of my own? Because the import object knows all of the file sets and its IDs, as well as the generic work that we created with it, why can't we just go ahead and throw everything together at the very last minute before the schedule relationships jobs truly kicks off and completes? We did that. We went ahead and worked forward, and we found beautiful results. The work that once took 11 hours to complete now takes less than an hour. We increased our file sets, which were all over the place everywhere, up to 192 file sets per hour, and that's compared to 12. And I don't want to go deep into the code, but if you do, if this is something that could help you, I provided a link in this slide to our current work. I do apologize up front. Currently, because we were working with two branches and two separate things at the same time, there is intermixed code as far as like not bulk racks install and optimization, but the gist of it is there, and we have provided notes in each of our commits to kind of label this as bulk racks work. And this part I'm going to hand back to Emily.
Thank you, Brad. So just wanted to kind of show some benchmarks around our ingest testing. And this kind of shows the pre and post tuning that we did on bulk racks. So one thing that we did while testing bulk racks was to try to find some previously ingested book objects in our production environment that we had, statistics for, and then replicate those in our test environment using bulk racks. And so we have, let's see, 6 or 7 works here, and containing book objects containing anywhere from 102 to 160 file sets. And so on the vertical axis of the chart, this is showing kind of the total ingest hours for each work. And the red line is our prior ingest benchmark. And the blue line is showing how long that same ingest took using bulk racks. And so you can see we got some initial performance gains just by using straight bulk racks. However, if you look at the last 2 entries on the right, you can see after we added these optimizations, we had a huge performance gain by making that modification. Next slide, please. And this slide is showing basically the same kind of data, but focusing on the average file sets per hour for these same works. Again, the blue line is bulk racks, and the red line is our prior production ingest. And you can really see again on those last 2 works, just the number of file sets per hour that we were able to process and attach to a work really skyrocketed after those modifications. So we're really excited about this. The fact that we can now start to do book ingest in an hour as opposed to days is really going to help us with our overall pipeline. Next slide, please. And finally, I wanted to show some of the modifications we made to the bulk racks UI. And I would clarify a lot of these we added just during that initial diagnostic phase because we have so many file set entries for each work. It was really difficult to kind of drill down and figure out which ones had failed and which hadn't. So one thing that we did was add this list of file set IDs. And this was really helpful while we were just trying to debug some of the problems with particularly the duplicate IDs showing up in the works members, even though they weren't, that's just a weird indexing thing. We also added a title column, and this was really helpful for me as someone who was doing a whole lot of QA on each job, trying to figure out which pages hadn't attached so that I could go prep another CSV import just for those missing file sets. Another thing we did was add an ID column, and this is just kind of showing us the minted ID for that particular file set so that we know that it was actually created successfully. And again, this information, the title and the ID, it is available in the current BulkRacks interface, but you really have to kind of drill down a few steps for each individual entry. And that was just very adding up to quite a bit of QA time. Next slide, please. And so we will wrap it up here. First, we want to send many thanks to the BulkRacks team and also a lot of Samverans who've helped us along the way. I want to thank our local software engineering and middleware teams for all their help, their support designing, reviewing, and testing this prototype. Very special thanks to Catherine Michaelis, who's our preservation program manager, for having to monitor so many of these very painful book ingests, and we hope that we're making her life easier. And then, as Brad has already mentioned, we've got a link to our code here, and we hope that you'll check it out. And we'd love to hear comments or questions. I know we have extra time. If we don't have a lot of questions, I'm sure we can just go to a break earlier.
And we do have plenty of time for questions. So people can put them in the Q&A. That'd be great. We can give it a few minutes. I know there's a lot of chatter in Slack right now.
It looks like we have a couple of questions. Will any of this work be PR'd back to BulkRacks? I think that's a great question. We're hoping to start attending the BulkRacks interest group meetings and would love to talk to the team about that. I know that this is a pretty complex change in some cases, but we'd love to talk to folks about that. And Tao has, I think, a similar question. Is this code change being put into the Hyrax code base? And I would say that's probably, again, that would be a BulkRacks change.
Yeah, the beautiful thing about BulkRacks is that, and some may consider this to be a negative, but I consider it to be a positive, is that the bulk of the file set actor, the attached work to files to work actor is kind of brought over into the BulkRacks base, so you're able to go ahead and alter it while not altering your base UI importing or your base importing period. So I kind of personally, in my opinion, I kind of feel that if you keep this to BulkRack side, it would probably be a better thing.
Any last questions? If not, we can move on to the next presentation a little bit early. Okay, Erin, are you here? I think I saw you come in.
I am, yeah.
Great. Emory folks, if you can stop sharing, then I will introduce Erin. And let me I know you're talking about Fedora 6. Welcome. I forgot the name of your presentation, but we have Erin Griffith from Fedora. Features and migration pathways. Great, thanks.
Easy enough. Yeah. So thanks everybody for having me. Can everybody see my screen all right? I'm hoping so.
Yes, and we can hear you just fine.
Yes. Fantastic. All right, awesome. Well, thank you for having me today. As Carolyn mentioned, my name's Erin Griffith and I'm the program manager for Fedora. I'm here today to talk about the newest version of Fedora, which is Fedora 6, and also talk about some of the tools and migration pathways for moving from older versions to 6.0. So I will just start by saying that the conversations that have been happening about Valkyrie and Hyrax as it relates to Fedora have been super intriguing over the last day and a half. I'm going to talk today specifically about Fedora to Fedora migrations. There's a little bit of information kind of that's specific to a lot of folks here, but I'm going to do my best to answer what questions I can for you. And if there's anything technically related that I cannot answer, please drop it in the Slack. I will get back to you and find out anything that I can answer today. So Fedora 6 and migration pathways, that's what I'm here to talk about. So just really briefly, for anybody that might not have a super deep understanding of exactly what Fedora does or what it is, a quick refresher for those who do know. Fedora is an open source preservation focused digital repository platform used to manage and disseminate digital content. So Fedora is used by a wide variety of institution types. We have cultural heritage organizations, scientific research centers, academic collections, libraries, and they all use Fedora to provide access to their, to store and provide access to their large and oftentimes very complex digital collections. So Fedora is designed to interoperate with other applications and services. It's not typically found as a standalone service or a standalone piece in the stack. A lot of people use it for their digital preservation needs, and then they would have a front end, for example, like Samvera and the Samvera applications, or things like Islandora, or oftentimes a custom front end to display to users. For anybody that isn't aware, last year we released the long-awaited and much-needed Fedora 6.0, which is the newest and most current version, and was a major revamp of our software. So in 6.0, as a kind of overview, we eliminated mode shape as the back end, which was in Fedora 4. And we did this, knowing that Fedora 4 and mode shape wasn't serving the community well in many ways. So mode shape was replaced with a new persistence layer, which incorporates the Oxford Common File Layout, or OCFL, as a preservation standard, which I'm going to get into in just a second. So Fedora, which is nearly into its 25th year, has been around for a little while. During this time, we've definitely seen the release of several iterations of the core software, for good and for bad. In 2008, Fedora 3 was released, and this was and still remains to be the most widely used version of the software that exists out there. And this is in large part due to the functionalities that Fedora 3 offers. So the main thing being this very transparent access to your data. But being nearly 15 years old, Fedora 3 has reached end of life and is no longer being supported by the community. So thanks to an IMLS grant funded project, the Fedora team, along with 2 pilot partners at the University of Virginia and Whitman College, we were able to create the much needed documentation and tooling to help get these users that are in instances of Fedora 3 to Fedora 6, because their content and security and access really is at risk being in Fedora 3 and it not being supported by the community. But I think most importantly here, we'll talk about, so in 2014, Fedora 4 was released, and it was at this point that the community needed to make a decision on how to modernize and update the technology and determine the direction that the software would ultimately take. So decisions were made at this juncture that had, kind of outcomes that we couldn't have predicted at that point in time. So mode shape was incorporated as a back end, and in doing so, we really lost all transparency to our data, and we locked things into systems with little to no visibility into what was happening. So, this is one of those pieces that we couldn't really foresee. Mode shape was subsequently dropped by its own community, and because of this, it really just became this black box of unknowns, which put some of our Fedora users in really tough situations. So Fedora 4 also had some speed and performance issues at scale. There was the issue of many members, which was impacting a lot of users. And this was partly based on the way that mode shape was handling the data. And then there was also the active Fedora component. So this created some additional performance issues because of the way that it was tied to Solar. And then the last piece was that migrations to Fedora 4 were massively resource intensive. We had re-architected the software, and the time that it was going to take people and the skill set that was required to have people migrate to 4 was immense. And then, having users get to 4 only to have it underperform was, a really harsh reality that the Fedora community needed to address. So all in all, Fedora 4 had this really unfortunate result, especially, as it relates to, I think, a lot of people in this community. I do just want to note that there are some people running instances of Fedora 4 that are not dissatisfied with the way it's performing. It's operating the way that they'd like it to. But I think, as an overall statement, we can say that, the community recognizes that 4 wasn't our best foot forward. So for us in Fedora, all of our actions from kind of this realization forward were directed at really creating something that was going to try to resolve as many of these issues for the community as a whole as we could. So the Fedora community came together and they really collaborated and tried to address all of the things that 4 lacked. And we came up with a solution that was going to deliver something to give everybody back all those things that people loved about Fedora 3. So that's what came out of, this unfortunate situation is Fedora 6. So between 4 and 5, we developed and released the Fedora API specification, which is another critical and key component that a lot of people are using to the best of its advantages. And with Fedora 6, like I mentioned, this is the software that our community needs now. It was nearly 2.5 years in the making and development and testing, and we really needed to get this right for the users in all of our communities. And we feel really strongly that Fedora 6 is going to deliver what 4 couldn't. So these are some of the features that Fedora 6 has to offer. If you've heard me talk before, I often go through this list, but one of the biggest and most important ones that I want to point out here is the adoption of the Oxford Common File Layout, or OCFL, as I mentioned, as a preservation standard within the persistence layer. So OCFL technically is a specification that describes an application-independent approach to the storage of digital information in a structured, transparent, and predictable manner. So it is a specification that dictates the way that data is laid out and formatted on disk. So it's designed to promote long-term object management best practices within digital repositories. It is defined and developed by an editorial board who is responsible for the upkeep, continued development, and maintenance of the specification. So OCFL is the specification, and Fedora 6 uses a Java implementation of the specification, and that comes standard in Fedora 6. And the idea here is that OCFL is going to give you back control over your repository. So data that's in an OCL format is entirely transparent. It's written in plain text files, and the standard dictates the way that's done so that you can see everything on disk, which is something that wasn't available with ModeShape. So with this visibility and this transparency and these, human parsable files in future, ideally, you won't need to reformat your data. And, if you needed to update hardware or software, the files remain as is, and you can just pick them up and move them elsewhere. So, less migrations, or at least less complicated migrations, is the end goal. So OCFL in the place of ModeShape also helps to tackle the speed and performance issues that we've seen, that have been identified in Fedora 4. We're still scale testing things in 6, but those who are using it really haven't encountered the same kind of types of problems that we've identified or that we've seen with past versions of 4. So that's the OCFL and the enhanced digital preservation components. Other features that we have for Fedora 3 to 6 migration specifically, there is extensive migration tooling and documentation. And this is, again, thanks to that IMLS grant that we were awarded. And this was to help lower those barriers to migration and bring these at-risk versions of Fedora to Fedora 6. There's an extensive migration toolkit that serves as a guide for executing the migration, along with templates, guides, command line tools, and all those things you need to actually execute the migration work. So we also have built-in simple search, not meant to replace something like Solr, but just a really easy kind of user interface that you can briefly browse through your repository if you need. And this was a community request when we were planning and laying out what 6 was going to look like. And another cool feature that we have is this kind of real-time performance monitoring capabilities. And this is done through an integration with Grafana and Prometheus. So you can link these up, and then you can see how your repo is operating in real time. And for us, this was really critical in the development and testing phases. Getting to 6, we were able to see what was happening quickly and understand where bottlenecks were happening so that we could dig in and fix these performance issues kind of as they were happening. And then lastly, with our newest version, 6.2, we have metrics collecting for anybody that's interested in seeing what's in your repository. It's just a really brief JSON output of, you can look at things like object count by MIME type, byte counts, really simple but helpful metrics. Again, this was another community request for a feature in 6. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we understand and we recognize that there is current work being done to replace active Fedora and with Valkyrie, and we're excited about that. And what this means kind of for the Fedora and Hyrax users. There's probably that slide that Daniel Pierce put up yesterday that everybody kind of grabbed onto and is probably circulating the communities now, outlining the Hyrax and the Valkyrie kind of progression and the future paths forward. And thank you, Alexandra Dunn, for your product update yesterday. I'm really looking forward to, what's coming down the line. But again, I'm here today. I want to talk about just straight Fedora to Fedora migrations. And I want to just outline what the pathways look like from older versions to 6. So as I mentioned, if you're running a version of 3, thanks to the grant work that I was talking about, the path is really straightforward. Fedora 3 can skip right over 4 and 5 and move right to Fedora 6 using the migration utils. But I imagine, a lot of the people here today are still sitting in versions of Fedora 4. And the pathway here does involve a few more steps, but it is possible and it is doable. And I have an example to share with you in just a moment. But the first step in Fedora 4 migration is getting to, the critical step, I guess, is getting to 4.7.5, so 4.7.5. And the reason for that is that older versions of 4, once you hit 4.7.5, what's there aligns more closely with the components related to the Fedora API. Just another note here, if you're on older versions of Fedora, I want to say 4.2 or later, there is a Java 8 update that is required to get you to move ahead. And that is just something that one of the examples that I'm going to give, one of the things that they ran into. So at the end of the slide deck, also, all of the migration pathways and the documentation that's related to it is included. So you can have a look through them. The documentation looks pretty clear. And from what we understand, it is pretty clear, but it's all there for you. So once you're at 4.7.5, you can then use the Fedora import-export utility to export your repository to disk. And then you will use the Fedora upgrade utility to upgrade 4.7.5 to a 5.1.1 export. And then you'll use the same utility again, make some parameter adjustments to input outputs, and you'll upgrade your 5.1.1 export to a Fedora 6 compliant OCFL. So it's going to rewrite the data and make it OCFL compliant. And then you'll be able to stand up your Fedora 6 repo and have it point to the new OCFL that you created in the previous step. So obviously, this is best case scenario. This is, steps to do it. From what we are hearing and what we know, the tools have worked so far. But really, for us, the best way to know if there's more needed or what isn't working, what is working, is for people to test and try. Sample sets, we're happy to take feedback on testing of sample sets, anything like that. But the more we know, the more support we can offer, and we can be ready for when, that Valkyrized Hyrax is ready as well. So this is just a brief outline of the tools that I just kind of mentioned to get you through those steps. So the first two, the top line there, these are for your 4 to 6 migrations. So there's the import export tool and the upgrade utility. For the bottom line there, these are for your 3 to 6 migrations and what's available. So there's the migration utils, which is actually the command line tool that you'll use to run the migration. And then there's a migration validator tool that you can run post-migration to ensure that all your content was moved over correctly and moved into Fedora 6 the way post-migration. So this has been a really helpful tool because we've heard that the migration utils will run a checksumming as it's migrating, and this can add time to what it takes to physically migrate. So if you turn the checksumming off during migrations, you can run this validator post-migration and save yourself some time on the actual migration itself, run the validator after, and then go back and verify. So this has been super handy. And then there's the metadata remediation guide that was created. This is an exhaustive and expansive metadata package put together by the team at Whitman College as part of that IMLS grant that I was talking about. So this is that example that I said I really wanted to talk, I really wanted to share today. I know that a lot of people, you like to hear who's done it, who's tried it, what's kind of happening in the community. So this was a Berlin State Library is one of the Fedora, is a Fedora community member, active and engaged over at Fedora. They migrated a Fedora 4 instance to Fedora 6 back when Fedora 6 was actually in alpha. I said I had beta originally written, but it was in an alpha release, and they opted to test the migration at that point. So the Berlin State Library had a Fedora 4.5.1 repository, and they chose to migrate to Fedora 6. So what they had was approximately 30,000 objects, roughly, I want to say just under 10 gigs, under 10, cancel that statistic, 30,000 objects we'll go with. So they were originally scanned documents that they had converted to PDF files with some XML descriptions. So they had 4.5.1 and they were using a custom Samvera front end. They did identify that 4.5.1 was working well for them, but what they really wanted to do was start looking to future-proof themselves, and they had a really big interest in what OCFL was going to offer them. So they selected this kind of smallish data set to sample and use the tools and run the process. So what they did is they needed to upgrade from 4.5.1 first to 4.6.1. And this is where they ran into that Java 8 issue that I had kind of mentioned just as a note. So they had to update to Java 8 in between there. What they did once at 4.6.1 is they created a backup of their repo here. Then they restored the backup using the upgrade utility. They restored the backup to 4.7.5, which gets them at that point that they can use, that it aligns with the API, and then they can use the rest of the tools to get forward. So at 4.7.5, they exported their repository to .ttl serialization. And Oliver can explain, Oliver Schoner is the individual who worked on the migration. He can explain better about their intentions and their purposes of exporting to the TTL serialization. But what they did with that, once they had it exported there, is they were able to then use the upgrade utility to get them to 5.5.1, and then the last step, upgrade to Fedora 6. So then they had the OCFL compliant pieces, and their data was all laid out in the way that they wanted it. So the feedback from their experience through this migration was that the tooling worked. They did encounter a few bugs in the alpha release of the tooling, but they were able to identify that, use the community to resolve those issues for future, for going forward, and they really wanted to kind of hammer home the fact that the community was what was instrumental in helping them get to 6, answering questions in the Slack channel, coming to the tech meetings, et cetera, et cetera. This is how we've tried to be responsive to those that are in this migration situation. Is we really need to hear that you're trying it, hear that you're doing it, so that we can step in and intervene, because we don't know what's not working until people are trying it. So, they were really thankful that the committer team was there to help them resolve what they ran into. That in terms of the migration, Oliver will tell you that it really wasn't necessarily the Fedora migration that was the most challenging. There were all the little small components along the way. He did recognize, it's a multi-step process. It's not a straight 3 to 6. Being at 4 means you do have to take those interim steps, but managing them in kind of like chunk portions and tackling them one step at a time was the way that they were able to get through it. So currently their migrated repository is using Fedora 6, still with active Fedora and a Samvera custom front end. They don't have any plans to remove active Fedora once Valkyrie is fixed on that particular repository. They're happy with the way it's performing, and they're happy with what it's doing. And as I understand it, it is an internal repository. They don't put things in, or it's just kind of sitting doing what it needs to do. They also have a Hyrax 2.x repo with Fedora 4.7.5 underneath, and this one they would like to upgrade in the future. So they would love to upgrade their Hyrax instance, move off of active Fedora, but this is what's still kind of in the pipeline for them. But if anybody does have any detailed specific questions about this particular migration and the work that Berlin State Library has done, Oliver is absolutely more than willing to talk about that or answer questions for people. Just send me a message and I can connect you. At the end of the slide, I also included a resource of Oliver talking about the migration at one of the Fedora user group meetings that was held back in 2020. But again, he's always more than willing to answer questions. So. And the last thing kind of I wanted to share here was just kind of, people always like to know what's happening, who's doing what, and, that's how people take their cues about what paths forward look like. So these are this is the current list of institutions that we know of who either have or are in the process of migrating to Fedora 6. So my pitch again, we're always looking to gather more information on people who are working with migrations or considering migrations so that we can better understand your process, what is working for you, what isn't working for you, so that we know how to help. A lot of what we're doing right now is trying to support migration. So if you are considering it, please reach out to us, and I would love to kind of hear what you're doing and see if we can connect you with somebody who might be able to either act as a mentor or answer any questions that you've got. So that is my list of resources. It does look extensive. If you need the tooling specifically, it's back. I will make sure the slide deck is available for everybody. It's back on the tools slide. But there's all the migration pathways that you need that I talked about, all the documentation that goes along with it, the video of Oliver Schoner at Berlin State Library talking about their migration, and then of course our communication channels. So please feel free to find us on Slack, find me on Slack, send me an email, whatever we can do to support going forward. And that is all I have. So thank you.
Thanks, Erin. Are there any, if there are any more questions? I know there were one or two, but you answered them during the course of your presentation. And if there are any more, we do have a good amount of time. So please, people type in the Q&A. That would be great.
I just see there was a question. So Berlin State Library have active Fedora working with 6. As I understand it, yes, they are running Fedora 6 with active Fedora and a custom Samvera. It's not Hyrax, as I understand it. It is just their own custom combination of Samvera applications on top. But yes, that is what Oliver tells me. Happy to take any other questions. I'm just trying to go through you guys are all very, very engaged on the Slack channel, and I love this. So I'm just reading through the conversation that's happening there.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much. That was awesome. And
thank you. Thanks for having me.
We are a little bit early, but that's okay. We're just going to take a longer break. So break will go until 20 past the hour. We'll see you all back at 20 past the hour. Welcome back, everyone. We're at about 20 past the hour, so let's get started. We have our working group updates. Chris will be speaking about the marketing working group. Adam will be speaking about the website migration working group. Rob will be speaking about bulk racks interest group, and Brian will be speaking about research data. So I'm going to stop sharing. Chris, are you here? I think I saw you.
I am, yes,
Awesome. Are you ready to go?
I am.
Great.
So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so I'm hoping everyone can see my slides there.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So thank you very much then. This is an update of the Samvera Marketing Working Group for this Connect here. So just as a recap for those people who may not be familiar with this working group, we are one that meets regularly every fortnight on a Wednesday at 11:30 Eastern Time. We have a Slack channel for specific discussion, but otherwise we also welcome people to join the calls. Come along, have a discussion. We are somewhat lower on numbers just because some people have had to move on to other responsibilities. It's very nice to be able to have members move on to better and greater things. So please do come along and have a conversation about marketing Samvera. In the context of a couple of things that I'll just describe shortly. We have our wiki page there as well, which has information about the meetings, but also some resources as well about how to present Samvera if you're talking about it externally. Just a brief update on engagement that we've undertaken this year. For those, some of you may have seen this at the events we were at. One of the strands of activity that we take forward and have done for a few years now is engage with conferences and key conferences where there may be relevance and likely interest in Samvera. And the three that we mostly give attention to are Code for Lib, Open Repositories, and DLF. And just to reflect, I suppose, some takeaways from the events over the course of this year, now that all three of those have happened. Code for Lib, of course, shifted its time zone this year to make it easier for people to attend because they really wanted to do it face-to-face, and it was great to be able to do that. And we sponsored the conference at a particular level to highlight Samvera. We believe it's important to keep maintaining a presence and awareness of Samvera at Code for Lib, given its the value of that conference more generally to library technology. And so we're looking to continue that going forward where we can at an appropriate level. Those people who are presenting at Code for Lib, always great to hear about your papers. If there's any way in which you feel it would be useful to showcase Samvera at that particular conference in different ways, then do please let us know. Open Repositories was also back this year, and it was great to be able to do that back in person, and that generated some useful and good discussions at the conference itself. One of the things we trialed when visiting produce a bunch of materials to give away, because we're trying to be as environmental and sustainable as we can, is to generate some QR codes and have those QR codes available, and they take you through to various relevant parts of the wiki and or the website so that people can benefit from those more direct links into the information we can share at those events. If you're interested in using those QR codes going forward, then please do let us know. And then DLF the other week, not so long ago, was also a useful engagement and also highlighted a particular way in which Samvera can promote itself in tandem with our vendors. We have, as a community, had tables at various events over the course of the year and the past few years. Sometimes they've been successful in generating discussions, sometimes they haven't. What we did find, however, in particular, was that by sharing a table with one of our vendors this time, we were able to engage with those people coming to talk to vendors more proactively, which was helpful in engaging conversation more generally about the community. Moving on, a couple of points for reflection and discussion by the community, which we welcome your input on. Firstly, to reflection on the role of the working group, marketing working group as it's called at the moment. The working group has been in place since we changed the name from Hydra to Samvera, and the purpose of it originally was to get the name Samvera out there so that people recognized it for what it was, and also for that it was now the new name for Hydra. And hopefully we feel we've done that. That job has been done, and it's been a successful transition. Essentially, we were marketing the name and we were marketing what we did. We reflected earlier this year that actually most of what we do now, we asked the question, is it marketing or is it more outreach and engagement? And hence, are we actually, the working group, doing what we say we do, which is market, or are we in a position where actually revisiting our charter and refreshing that around that outreach and engagement aim be more appropriate? So we are doing that, and we welcome thoughts on the approach that it would be useful for the working group to take forward in terms of helping Samvera to be known in the best way that it can be through the activities that we can support as a working group, in tandem with the engagement that people are having more broadly through events and internal and external conversations that they have. So thoughts welcome in the Slack or through one of our meetings, and very much welcome participation and contribution in order to help us take this forward. Moving on, one of the other conversations we've been having, and this is simply to share and reflect, is that we have a Samvera motto. And if you look at the bottom of slides using the Samvera PowerPoint template, you'll see that it is, if you want to go far, go together. It's a motto that's served us very well over the last decade. And it has been in use for a long time. But feedback we've received highlights that it still applies and it is still used, and that's great. But in keeping with refreshing and understanding where we want to go as a working group and whether or not where our shift of focus may be, we also asked the question about whether or not that motto, used as it is quite extensively and broadly, not just by us, but by others as well, and ask the question, does it now convey everything we wish to say about Samvera, given where we are now and where we would like to promote ourselves in the future? So we're looking to try and ask and reach out to the community in the way that we very successfully did when we came to change our name, to ask for input on new mottos or perhaps additional mottos that we may be able to use to help frame and describe what Samvera is for us and how we would like to present it to others outside the existing community directly. Let us have your thoughts and ideas. They're all very welcome. And we know that there is a very creative community out there that could contribute. Lastly, don't forget, we have an FAQ on the website, which is intended to help people coming fresh to Samvera to understand what we offer. Suggestions for updates, always welcome. We do keep an eye on it, but again, we're always interested in understanding what questions you're receiving to know what we can present through that FAQ. And where you are presenting on Samvera, it's always great if you could use the Samvera slide deck and templates, which again, we'll keep an eye on and maintain as a group, but please do use them. And if you do produce presentations using them, then please do share them, because it's great to have an insight as to how Samvera is being presented to different audiences around the place. Otherwise, gone a bit too long, I think, but thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. Adam, you're up next.
All right. All right, I am Adam Marling, go by he, him, and I'm a developer at Northwestern University. And I was one of the volunteers, I think, that reached out along with a couple of my colleagues on our dev team, Northwestern, to kind of help out with the Samvera.org migration, which I think was earlier this summer or late spring. Just move this a little bit so I can see it. So some of the primary goals, and again, I was helping more on a technical level than motivational behind it. But from what we understood, some of the overarching goals on this migration were to move away from WordPress and the custom WordPress theme that I think was like contracted and in place for the past few years. And then also to kind of like investigate some maybe more modern alternatives, maybe some static site frameworks, to see if there was something, that caught our attention. And then finally, and maybe most importantly, how do we arrive at a new platform that's easy for community members to manage content? And eventually where we wound up was evaluating a few of the static site frameworks out there, and we arrived at Next.js, which is kind of a full stack JavaScript framework, but very capable of spitting out static sites at various levels of scale, and something that we were familiar with and have used in a few projects, our team in Northwestern. Next.js, just a quick overview. It kind of follows the Jamstack site pattern, if people are familiar with that, which basically kind of means at the end of the day, with your static site, you don't need a server or a backend really at all. Offers some benefits, including performance, security. There's no database to hack into. It scales, and it provides a really nice developer experience with the ability to get your hands on some modern kind of tooling. So a new site overview. I have a couple tabs open. So this is kind of it in its current shape and form. And again, this was just kind of a migration, not necessarily a redesign. So hopefully at the end of the day, it's not finished yet, but it should retain the look and feel of the existing current site. And just as an overview, so it's a full stack app hosted in GitHub at Samvera, in Samvera Labs. The name of the project is just Samvera.org if people are interested in checking it out. Before the static site is generated, it's a full stack app, Next.js app. It uses markdown files for all of its content. So that was one of the main, initial tasks that we did. We would take all the database content or the MySQL content from the existing site, which is how WordPress stores its content, and basically batch transferred all that and converted it into markdown files, which is now what the new site is using almost exclusively for its content. So Next uses Node.js on the back end to kind of handle markdown files and process those, hands those to React on the front end, which handles the UI rendering logic, I guess. And then I also decided to use Tailwind CSS, which is another kind of more popular styling CSS tool that people might be familiar with to make styling updates pretty quick and easy and almost inline in the future. And then during the build process itself, again, a static site is generated. The site currently is hosted or can be hosted for free at GitHub. Currently, it has the GitHub IO address, but once this is fully realized, we can point samvera.org to GitHub and we can host it for free. So how do people update content? Again, just real quick overview. I could go into further detail if anyone is curious, but this is the general project structure. So most of the content that a content manager would be interested, it's all in this markdown directory. And the way I set this up is all these folders kind of map to the main navigation on the site itself. So say you wanted to, or someone would update the FAQ page, you could do this right in GitHub. You could pull it down on your own machine, make your content updates. And again, that would correspond to this page right here. Make whatever updates you want, and then you basically just submit a pull request, which you can do again straight through the GitHub interface. And then someone else reviews that, it merges in, and when it merges to main, it will have GitHub Actions set up. So it'll create a new static build and the site will be automatically updated. Again, just high level general overview for developers out there. If anyone's curious to see a pattern of how you might, build a static site just with markdown content alone, there's some patterns in there that were kind of fun to come up with and might prove helpful if anyone's curious. And lastly, here's some links if folks want to check it out. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Adam. I think we had a bulk recs update next, but I'm not seeing Rob. Rob, are you here? Oh,
Yes,
I see
I'm
Rob.
here.
There you are. Sorry, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, I just made
I
you a
was trying to figure out
panelist.
how to tell you I was here when I couldn't talk.
Yep,
Okay.
I made you a panelist, so you're good to share.
I'm pushing the buttons. Sorry, I decided at the very last second to review my slides in the Samvera slide format because I listened to the last talk. All right, here we go. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Excellent. So this is the Bulk Rocks working group updates. I'll start with brief what is Bulk Rocks, though I do feel like the Emory presentation earlier did a really great job of explaining this. So I'm going to go fast. It's an import-export tool for Samvera applications. It supports round-tripping of data. It includes a UI, API, and CLI tool. It can import from OAI feeds, CSV, and several XML formats out of the box. It's easy to override and customize for individual applications. And we do a regular release cycle with clear upgrade paths as we move apps from one version of Bulk Rocks to another. So you can find it at Samvera Labs/Bulk Rocks. Who is Bulk Rocks? There are known users at ATLA who paid for the sort of initial Bulk Rocks implementation. We learned about Emory's implementation earlier. The British Library and British Museum use Bulk Rocks. NIMS, which is the materials research in Japan, uses it. It's not here on my slide, but the Department of Transportation for the US government uses Bulk Rocks. Washington University, Advanced Digital Library, Pontley Palsy, GBH, and more. You all can probably figure out that I am not Braden Justice. I'm Rob Kaufman. Braden is the current product owner. He's not able to be here with us because he is currently residing in Japan, and this is not a reasonable time for people in Japan to give a presentation. When is Bulk Rocks? So the Bulk Rocks interest group / working group meets on the 4th Tuesday of each month at 4 p.m. Eastern. We were kind of meeting internally as a team because SoftServe does so much Bulk Rocks work and realized that it would be better to kind of branch that out to the whole community. So we kind of put a fixed thing on the calendar and formed the group around it. Bulk Rocks itself does not currently have a release cadence, so we don't release every week or every 2 weeks, but we do regular version releases. Why is Bulk Rocks? Often the ingestion of the old thing into the new thing gets pushed to the end of a build process, and it's often a few scripts that are just thrown together. Bulk Rocks gives us a solid platform to deal with whatever the unique challenges of a given institution's ingestion process is. And let's just focus on that, the business logic, and not on providing a basic UI to see whether the import succeeded or doing reporting or any of those things. And that those things get improved over time as you go from project to project to project and run into unique challenges. It's the ability to, it emphasizes that the ability to get items out of repositories is just as important as getting them into our repositories. Export is a first-class citizen in bulk recs and is an important feature. The ability to export a small collection into a CSV, edit that collection, and then re-import it is something that's just really great for quick edits. You can share standard parsers for formats like Perl, mods, mets, OAI, etc. We don't have to reinvent that wheel every time. And as I mentioned before, SoftServe was meeting really regularly because we have bulk recs on 3 or 4 active projects at any given time. And we didn't want to have the left hand changing the way updates work while the right hand was also trying to change the way updates work, for example. So we transitioned this into the working group to make room for the community to participate. And we are very close. There are 2 open tickets for getting bulk recs out of Samvera Labs. It clearly meets the user requirements. I think there's just some CI setup that's left to, then we'll be asking for promotion. It didn't fit in the meme slide. So we're looking to increase participation in the working group. That's a big shock. I know that none of the other groups are looking to add more people or interest to them. But we'd love to get more folks coming to that even on a semi-regular basis. If you're using bulk recs, let us know. And specifically, there's a page in the bulk recs GitHub repository that lists the folks using bulk recs. It is empty right this minute, so I will put a link to that in the Samvera Connect Slack. So if you're using bulk recs, you can let us know. That'd be awesome. And shameless plug, SoftServe is available to do bulk recs installs and configurations. And that's it. I'm done.
Thanks so much, Rob. Moving right along, we have the research data working group update. Brian, you ready?
Yes. All right. Thank you, Carolyn. I'm Brian McBride. I'm head of digital infrastructure development at the University of Utah. My pronouns are he, him. Get this out of the way. So the Samvera working group update. So just want to make sure, announce all the working group members who spent a lot of time over the past few months working on this project. Their names are there. And then we were tasked with the following. We were trying to gather information regarding who is using Samvera software for the research data platforms and document the interest in the community for the repository, data repository features, and document the current state of Samvera software in terms of the functionality that is either present or not present in Samvera applications that research data repositories require, and capture existing and possible future use cases. So we went about this back this summer, and we decided to sort of track a questionnaire into 3 separate areas of focus. The first one was organizations who currently use Samvera applications for research data. We wanted to understand more about why they chose the Samvera applications and collect feedback. We structured these questions very open-ended way so that we didn't really constrict people to the responses. So we wanted to get as much feedback as possible. The other track was organizations not currently using Samvera applications for their research data repositories. So we wanted to understand why entities maybe evaluated Samvera and why they chose not to use the Samvera application, and what was it about the application they chose that made them take that path. And then lastly was the organizations that don't currently have research data application solutions in place, but are actively looking. So we crafted that survey later in this summer and released it in the fall. We disseminated it to the Samvera Partners Tech Community Listservs and the Haiku for Consortia, the Code for Lib Listserv, the Fedora Community Listserv, the Data Curation, Research Data Preservation Network, Activist Alliance, and the Research Data Alliance. We left the survey open for 3 weeks. Survey data overview. So we're still in the process of going through this, all the data that we collected. So just in summary, we received 54 responses, and it breaks down 11 do not currently provide research data or services. So we got some information there. For the third track, 22 are using an application other than Samvera to provide data repository services. 14 are using Samvera applications. And unfortunately, there were 7 incomplete or duplicate responses, which we had to remove from the analysis. And we received 16 responses from partners. So we just wanted to give everyone at Connect a little bit of information before we publish the report later this year. So the main themes as to why Samvera applications were chosen. Samvera is open source and community supported. That theme was pretty common throughout. Flexibility to develop and tailor to local needs. Again, that was a really important thing across the board. And it compared favorably with other open source options at the time of evaluation. I think that really is important to note. And ease, and this was sort of existing familiar with the Samvera stacking code. And again, specific benefits for the repository, Haiku's multi-tenancy, and more control by depositors via self-deposit. The other thing is Samvera applications and why they were not chosen. Extensive development work is required was a theme that we heard. Lack of in-house capacity to migrate and support Samvera applications of production. And the difficulty in bringing the developers up to speed in Samvera. And I know these are all things that the community is actively working on right now. Gap support for larger data sets, descriptive metadata schemas, creation and bulk upload. So in closing, we're going to provide a final report, including all of the survey data to the partners by the end of the year. And we wanted to provide the community with another opportunity with the Birds of a Feather meeting today at 2 to provide some feedback and information. If this is the first you've heard about the working group, we encourage you to show up so we can take some information and include it in the final report at the end of the year. And if you want to stop by the Slack channel, and you can pass along information there as well. We do meet every other Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern. There's our link to our wiki. And if you just want to reach out to me, that is my email address below. So thank you.
Thanks, Brian. So up next is our panel discussion, recruitment and retention of technology talent with Brian. That's why I pinned him, and we'll be pinning Rosalind Metz, Colin Brittle, Jessica Hilt, and Trey Pendragon as well. So I'm going to unmute myself and you all can get started. I apologize. We are running a little behind. So that means our break is going to be very short. We might not have one.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to welcome you all to the panel on recruitment and retention of technology staff. My name is Rosalind Metz. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the AUL for Library Technology at Emory, which is located on the land of the Muscogee Creek people, where Emory's Oxford and Atlanta campuses are now located. I'll be the moderator for today's panel. As many of you may be aware, recruitment and retention of technology staff is a hot topic, not only within libraries, but also within the broader workforce. But I've noticed that many of the discussions around this are happening at high levels. And in order to get a better view on the topic, this panel was put together to feature direct managers of technology talent. So each of the panelists is going to go around and really briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll move on to questions, which we've gathered in advance from the community. But please do feel free to submit questions in the Q&A feature and also on Slack, and I will read them out for you. So Brian, do you mind going first?
Sure. Thanks, Rosalind. I'm Brian McBride. I'm head of the digital infrastructure development team at the University of Utah. Pronouns are he and him.
Jessica?
I'm Jessica Hilt. I am the manager of everything at UC San Diego. And my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Chrissy?
Hi, I'm Chrissy Rismayer. I'm the Director of Digital Library Development at UC Santa Barbara, and my pronouns are she, her.
Trey?
Hi, everyone. I'm Trey Pendragon, the Senior Developer and Digital Library Development Manager here at Princeton University Library. My pronouns are he and him.
And Colin.
Hi, I'm Colin Brittle. I am the lead software engineer, head of the software development team at Emory, and my pronouns are he, him.
So our first question is, what are the biggest challenges your organization faces with recruiting technology talent? And what strategies have you implemented to improve the diversity of your talent pool? Colin, do you mind taking that one?
Sure, yeah. One of the biggest challenges we have is being able to offer salaries that are competitive. That's absolutely like the top thing that makes it difficult for us to recruit new talent or retain talent. We have taken some steps in order to get better candidates in when we are doing job searches. I don't think I've done 2 job searches the same way. And we've ended up hiring a decent number of people over the last couple of years. So it's been a significant number of changes. Some of the things that I liked that we've adopted have really been around trying to make the experience as blind as possible for our people within Emory reviewing our candidates, and also making it as pain-free and as accommodating as possible for those candidates on their end. So for one, in one instance, we tried, rather than having a audio kind of phone interview as a portion of the hiring process, we tried a written version of that, so kind of typing back and forth. We found that that didn't work out so well because people tend to type a little slow, and people reviewing that on the other side aren't really sure if that's because they don't know what they're trying to say, if they're having difficulty, and it felt like the interview kind of drew out. So instead, now we ask people, we send people a list of questions like we would for a phone interview, and we let them write down their answers in advance. And the actual phone interview is less about them trying to like come up with an answer on the spot, and more about reflecting on the answer they gave us, modifying it, or explaining parts that we don't understand. And we find that that makes candidates a lot more at ease. And it means that, if English isn't your first language, you have a lot of extra time to go in and reflect on your answers and present that your best foot forward to the group.
Thanks, Colin. Does anybody else have anything to add about what they've been doing?
I think I should throw Chrissy under the bus because she has a really great blind process that she's been using. So I think she should elaborate on that.
So I'll chime in just to say we based our internal process very much on Jeremy's presentation he gave a couple years ago to this community. It was really impactful. We don't use the written questions just because it's not something that our HR process allows. But we do our initial candidate reviews are all blinds, and we have adopted the sort of weighted matrix approach, which I think has been really helpful. The other thing, and I actually want to give Tamsin credit for this, is we had wanted to incorporate some kind of technology screening into our process. And that is always a sort of difficult thing from an HR standpoint. We don't want to be asking people to like write code for us. And so what their idea was to structure it as a pair programming session. So we actually write the code in advance, and it's structured as a code review process, right? So they are reviewing code that's already written and talking through potential areas that they see could use improvement, and opening tickets sort of in response to that. And we had some really positive feedback from one of our candidates who actually reached out to me to say how much that individual liked that process because it gave them a good sense of our team dynamic and what it would be like to work as part of the team. The other thing I just want to make sure I state is we don't actually require a computer science degree in our job applications, or in our job postings. We do put it as a preferred, but I actually don't think there is a single software engineer on our team with a computer science degree. They've come to programming via alternative pathways and are very talented and very passionate about it. And so, you know, that's, I think, been really helpful in broadening our candidate pools as well.
Thanks, Chrissy. I'm going to actually move on to the next question because I don't want to be the reason we don't take a break. The next question is, what specific types of experience, skill sets do you look for when hiring developers in this space? And Trey, do you mind answering this for us or starting off?
Yeah, so I have a bunch of bullet points here, but I think the thing I want to lead off, and so that we all get a break, is just being in a place that has a software development team where I can spread technical knowledge through layers of experience. I'm mostly interested in less technical skills and more collaborative skills when I'm looking to hire a new developer. Some of those things are diverse experiences and viewpoints. Our team can only be so big and still work. So it's really strategic for the members of our team to have as many unique backgrounds and experiences as possible. I look for strong communication skills. Technologists are better at teaching technical skills than they are at teaching communication skills. So the stronger you are there when you come in, the better you will be as you go forward. When we interview, we try to implement a few practices that we've talked about here already, like providing interview questions ahead of time to give folks a chance to prepare, giving them the schedule so they know what their audience is going to be. And our technical interview is a pairing exercise in the language that they choose, rather than forcing them to understand our code base or anything like that. The ability and willingness to respectfully collaborate as a team is a really big skill for us. Software development's a team exercise. So to make sure that our code's maintainable, we do check-ins, pairing, ensemble, software development, collaborative design. And to be successful and happy, that has to really be something that's one of your values. And the last thing is interest in software development as a craft and a commitment to ongoing learning. And that really comes from, it used to be that you would look for like really specific technical skills. But I think our industry has sort of come to the realization that those sorts of skills are both teachable and transferable between technologies. So it's really important that the person you're hiring sees the work they do as a craft to learn and improve on. You can usually see this in things like they have opinions about the minutia of the software that they work on. They're looking for new design patterns. They want to talk about books. They have excitement about some new technology. I will say you do have to be careful about looking for this one. The stress of an interview really puts a lot of pressure on them, and it can be hard to tell if this actually exists or not, just in that sort of scenario.
Does anybody else have anything they want to add?
I think I'd just reiterate what Trey was mentioning is it's sort of like more of a focus on the soft skills that are very difficult, if not impossible, to teach. So we put a lot of emphasis on the soft skills like effective communication, a passion for learning, because we understand that, especially with our very specific stack, that day one, somebody's not going to come in and know everything. So we've just baked into the process that we are going to expect 3 to 6 months of training to get somebody to the point where they're somewhat proficient. Hopefully by the end of the year, they will understand everything, but it's a process, and you just need to understand that you're typically not going to find the perfect candidate day one, and it's going to be a lot of work on your team to bring them up to speed. And that's what we're all going through. And yeah, the passion for learning, I think our team is one of the best things we have is everybody wants to learn something new and improve their skills. And they see, because we can't compensate with the private sector or compete, it's just never going to happen. But people see that the work they do is the common good, and they can see the work that they produce impacting people's lives, especially some of our larger projects and how that's impacting medical research and things like that. So again, just what Trey said is the soft skills, and then the technical stuff is going to be trained. And some of the things that we do is we just like to do code reviews of code people either produced in school or done on their side. So that's sort of like the technical component that we focus on, is stuff they've written beforehand, not necessarily doing a test, and have them explain why they did it this way and whatnot.
Thanks, Brian.
Can I just say something real quick? I just wanted to say that this is really hard, this cultural shift, and they could still be perfect even if they don't know Ruby. You know what I mean? Like, you really have to internalize that.
Carolyn has informed me that there will be a break, so we're going to be okay. So the next question is, what expectations do technology talent have around their work and working environment? And what strategies or programs have you implemented to help retain technology talent? Jessica, do you mind starting us off?
Happily. I will also call on Chrissy because she and I work very much together. So I know she'll have a lot of input in this question as well. I think there's probably the formal things that we do to retain talent, right? Like compensation. And we at the UCSD library give a big fat yearly amount of money so that you can continue your training and development. So that's attending conferences or taking classes. But that stuff is not stuff that I can actually control. I will say it is how the library recruited me, is when I learned about the ongoing education funding element. It was, to me, it really sang of how the library invests in their people. And so it made me very interested in working in the library. So there was obviously some benefit to that because I am awesome and they got me. But in general, that's not stuff I can control. The thing that I can control as a dev manager is developer happiness. And that's actually a term that I have to give credit to Matt Critchlow for teaching me, and kind of understanding what makes developers happy and finding out. And in general, it's not necessarily the things that I would put as what makes developers happy, right? Like I would think a big fat paycheck makes developers happy, but that's not true. It's things like weirdly really good CI/CD, like being able to push your code and see if it works and if it doesn't work, and not having a big delay and being able to check it makes you feel really good about what you write and makes you want to go back and write more. Having a really good DevOps environment. If you work really well with the ops team and it's not just throwing stuff over the wall, it does make developers really happy because it's this blocker that disappears. And so, giving them a chance, like my team wrote some stuff in Go this year, and I had a coronary about that because I was like, it is not Ruby. What are you doing to me? But turns out they really liked it and it was fun, and I guess that's important. So having fun when you program, so that was good for them. It just caused me some minor stress. What about you, Chrissy? What do you think?
Well, I'll say one of the things that I think has really made an impact for us is actually working with you all in Surfliner, being able to build the relationships across our community and work together and have opportunities to learn and pair with other developers that are not just on your immediate team that you're working with on a day-to-day basis. It's also one of the reasons why I love the Samvera community and am really supportive of our team collaborating in this space too, is I think, like you were saying, learning is one of the reasons that I'm attracted to my job, and just being able to continue to grow and explore. Like you said, we can't compete necessarily on salary. I wish we could. You may not be aware of this, but Santa Barbara is an incredibly expensive place to live. And so the support for remote work has been really important for us. I also, although I can't control university policy around a lot of our guidelines, we do have flexible work arrangements that the university provides. I'm very supportive of those for my team, whether it's like a 4-10 schedule or wanting to have slightly offset hours. I think that work-life balance is part of what's really important to me working in libraries, right? And I feel like it's something that attracted me to this space, that I'm not going to be working 12-hour days and not seeing my family or feeling like I need to work every weekend. And so that's also something that I want my team to be able to benefit from. I'm looking at my notes because I've written down stuff. But yeah, I mean, for me, a lot of it is just like leaning into the things that we all like about working in libraries. The collaborative nature, it's not a competitive environment, right? Like, we're not out to make billions of dollars. Like, we're here to make things better. And again, that's something that really attracted me. And so I really like to lean into that as a development manager.
Thank you, both of you. And I do think Jessica's out to make billions of dollars and take over the world, but that's neither here nor there.
It's not going to be with money. It's going to be my pure willpower.
So the next question is, how do you support junior developers or new staff around training and development? We talked a little bit about this, but what strategies do you employ when investing in your staff? Brian, do you mind starting us off with this?
Sure. So some of the things that we've done in the past with our full-time developer hires is we have them team up with one of our senior developers and sort of get an initial lay of the land to understand what the infrastructure is, what it looks like, and really have them sort of ask questions. But one of the more important things is we try to create an environment where you feel comfortable to ask any question. It's really important to create that environment. I can't stress that enough, because you need to ask questions. It's great even when senior developers have questions and junior developers answer them. That's a really good learning opportunity to remind everyone that we all have different skill sets and understandings, and it's really important to share information and feel comfortable in the environment to ask questions. The other thing too is sort of the idea of failure. Failure is acceptable. Failure is actually encouraged. Like, fail often, but fail fast. That's one of the things, like, when things break or whatever, that's just part of the nature. We have systems in place to reduce that probability. And when things do happen, we make sure they don't happen again, because it's learning technology. It's something that's evolving, and we need to make sure we have systems in place. But one thing we do is we're fortunate enough to have some student developers through the computer science department at the university. And what we do is we team them up with either a junior developer or senior developer, and we sort of work on projects that they're interested in. So we have like a whole backlog of projects that we'd love to get done in a timely manner, but sometimes that's just not going to happen. So we sort of go through the process and let them pick. We sort of prioritize them, and we let them decide and sort of pitch us on how they want to go about developing it. And then we'll walk through, let them sort of lead the pathway and doing check-ins throughout the entire process and sort of helping them through that. But we give them a lot of leeway in how they want to approach it. And that goes back to sort of what Jessica said when she was talking about one of their teams developed something in Go recently. So some of these applications are built in languages that our full-time employees have some understanding of, but it's not necessarily their area of expertise. So that's sort of like a concern for sustainability long-term. But we think it's worthwhile because it's going back to that nature of like a culture of and passion of learning, and learning new things, accepting the challenge. And I think that's a thing that's really important. I can't stress enough. So yeah, some of those strategies we also use, give them full access to all of our the like plural site and stuff like that when requested, lynda.com, and all those like standard libraries that we have available. But yeah, we just going back to, we try to create the environment where questions are encouraged and build in systems to help people along the way.
Thanks, Brian. Does anybody have anything else to add? Oh, Jessica.
Yeah. What I wanted to add is that I recently went through this. We lost a developer before COVID to a private company, and in writing up for the recruitment, I knew that we would never recruit at the same level. We just aren't competitive enough. It was definitely during the big boom of salaries recently. There was just no way I was going to get somebody as experienced as the person who was leaving. So we recruited a junior developer, a developer. I hate the word junior, level 1 developer or whatever, right out of college. And that person didn't even have Ruby, right? They'd never touched Ruby before. They did Python. They had some experience writing code and, could show that. But in this interview process, we used the same pairing exercise that Chrissy and Tamsin wrote up. And we modified it for a junior developer and had that. And we actually recruited one of the least experienced developers in the panel. And that was because they got along really well with the team. The team really enjoyed working with them. And we knew when we were bringing them on that they weren't going to have any Ruby experience. So I had already set up a plan for, an educational plan to onboard them to Ruby. But they also knew that this was a big learning experience for them and that our team was already set up to do pairing. So I know some teams don't do pairing. That blows my mind, but some teams don't. And pairing is a really great way to get everybody up to speed, but especially junior developers. So I think that was a big thing for us, was to make sure that there was a great environment where they could ask questions. They kind of knew that from the get-go in the interview process, because they got to pair with our team. They got to see that flavor. They got to see what it would be like day to day. And so we are also, they're self-selecting out if they don't like that kind of environment. The person that we recruited actually had a counter offer for a lot more money, but enjoyed our team and the experience of pairing. So, chose us over that private company, which I think was pretty awesome and says a lot about that person. So I think, I know there's a struggle of hiring junior developers. There's a big, gap in the middle where we don't have a lot of experienced developers that we can hire with the pays that we're putting out there. And yeah, we might lose this person in a year or 2 years to another company. But for me, it's worth it, because it feels very much like this is what higher ed is for, is bringing people on and bringing them up. So I feel like I'm supporting the mission, even though it's not a student. It's, although they did graduate from a UC, pretty cool. Not our UC, so I won't hold it against them. But so it feels like it's supporting that mission as well. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay if we get somebody for 1 or 2 years and we end up losing them. I'm hoping I'm so fabulous and our team is so fabulous that they'll want to stay, but I'm willing to take that risk.
A question that has come up in Slack is, does anybody have education plans shared in Samvera for learning Ruby, or just education plans generally? Like, I know actually the way I learned it was through Railsbridge. Are there similar things, or like what's out there that you all might be using for these individuals who maybe don't know it right now?
Rosie, I didn't know you learned Ruby through Railsbridge. That's awesome.
I was at the very first Railsbridge.
That's so cool.
Old. I had no idea I was at the first Railsbridge because it wasn't actually called that.
I can find what I had our new developer do, and I'll post it in the channel. I'm not going to dig through my email and find it now, but I will do that.
We have 3 student developers in our training program, happens during the summer. And we have a sort of formalized go from I've never made a website to be a Rails developer process that happens during those 3 months, which is going under some review right now because get feedback from your team. And turns out people hate watching videos all day, go figure. But I'd be happy to share what we have in the discussions we've had about changing that process.
I think that'd be great. I personally love watching videos all day.
I'm also happy to share, we participate, it's actually the office of our CIO started a new internship program on campus that they fund. And it's a cohort model where they have interns placed in a bunch of different departments on campus. They are actually trying to target, in a lot of cases, non-computer science students to try to bring them into the field. Not always. Our current intern is a computer science student. Our first two are not. But they do a lot of sort of learning and exploring together as a cohort. And then in our department, it's much more focused on sort of our projects and training just to support that. But I'm happy to share information about that program if that's helpful. I think it's been a really successful one at UCSB so far.
Great. The next question is, what are some good or interesting suggestions for creating a collaborative community when you have teams of technical staff working fully remote? Trey, actually, will you take this one, kick us off?
Sure. So my team is all fully remote. One thing I want to prefix with is that building a community of remote employees really takes active and intentional work to ensure that your culture recognizes that those folks are colleagues and that you respect them that way. It's easy to say and really hard to do. For remote staff to feel at home, they need to be welcomed from really the ground up at all layers of the institution. And that really didn't happen until recently, when a large portion of IT staff were forced to work remotely. It's hard work, and you need intentionality and real respect for that process. Some suggestions I can give are assume everyone is remote and sort of act accordingly. So when you go to meetings, everybody should have a webcam. Have open channels of asynchronous communication and invite people to them so that they feel welcome and discuss in there. We use Slack. Be intentional about collaborations. You have to have process if you have remote employees to provide opportunities for people to connect. So we do things like a monthly IT social hour on Zoom, bi-weekly cross IT catch up where folks write down what they've done for the last couple of weeks, and then you build an agenda where people ask, like, can you tell me more about this? What does this mean? Can we talk about this that's related? And encourage staff to host book clubs, do courses together, or give small presentations, and make sure you give them the time that they need to actually do that during work. Let's see, what else do we have? Adopt representatives from other teams into your team. So we have a member of ops who has been adopted and comes to all of our stand-ups and our retrospectives and so on. Run retrospectives really often so that you can ask your staff, like, how's this going? How do you feel? What's it like to be remote? And like run it for everything else too. We do it every 6 to 8 weeks. And respect your team. You need to cultivate a culture where they feel like it's not only okay to reach out to colleagues and connect, but encourage it and do those things yourself. What you do will impact what they do. So like book one-on-ones with people to catch up, even outside your team. Invite new staff to talk to your team, not just about work, but also about their interests. Host casual get-togethers. We've done game days. Frequent mainstays. We'll do Friday afternoons and we'll go watch a Twitch stream about ducks and just kind of hang out. The ducks are really cute. And finally, bring your staff to campus a couple of times a year. They don't have to come all the time, but being in a space with your colleagues, you build a community that it's just hard to describe. Like that helps them feel like I'm a part of the campus in a way that is hard to do when you're remote.
Does anybody else have anything? Chrissy, I know you, Tamsin commented about your practices, so I'm curious.
I should read that comment.
It was a good comment. It was not a bad.
Yeah, I have not yet spotted. Yes. Yes, it is hard to get the rest of the library on the same page, even after COVID. And one of the things that we adopted very early on after DLD, our department was formed, this was pre-COVID, but we did have a few full-time remote staff even before then, is we adopted a policy that if anyone is remote, we're all remote. Because we are all remote from each other. And so our first couple of meetings were like the hybrid, where it'd be like a group of people and then like, Tamsin, it's on the screen. And we were like, this is a bad idea. We're just gonna have everyone call in. I do have half my department, the digitization lab is fully on site. And so like in our department meetings, the dev team interacts on a daily basis, most of the time, frequently throughout the day. But we always do take the opportunity to hear from everybody so that they can share with each other. And then we haven't had an all hands since COVID, but when we did before, we tried to have opportunities where we go out to lunch together and spend some time just hanging out and building our relationships there. We do have very, very active Slack conversations. We made sure to have a random channel so people can just share stuff that's not work related and connect as humans. I think it's really important to connect as humans in the work environment and making space for that. We don't watch ducks together, but I really love that idea because it sounds adorable. But making sure that we're taking time in meetings to like interact with each other as humans and like seeing babies and animals and like all of the wonderful things in our lives that are at home. We also really, really strongly believe in retrospectives and really using that to help improve our team culture and the way we work together. It's something Jessica and I talk a lot about, really the power of retrospectives, and I think helping to grow our collaboration with UCSD. I feel like there was something else I was going to mention, but it slipped out of my brain. So I will make space for others to contribute if they have thoughts.
I'm going to pop in one thing that we discovered recently at Emory is that, Colin, is it DoorDash that we use? DoorDash lets you create like a group order remotely. It's like specifically for remote teams. So everybody can have lunch sent to them within a budget. One person sends the invites out and then everybody gets lunch ordered for a particular time. And then like, you can sit on Zoom and have your thing together.
That's really cool, Rosie.
I
What has
didn't
the
discover
feedback
it.
been about like that, Rosie?
What?
What's the feedback been like about that, Rosie?
Colin?
It's pretty positive. Like the fact that like before, like during COVID, we had a little bit of a problem with this sort of thing because budget limits meant that there was effectively no way we could do something like that. Or if we were trying to get it all on a single corporate card, everybody has to be in the same location. So having something like DoorDash and being able to like have a lunch remote works really well. The place where we found this out, we actually kind of had a hybrid event where we were trying some other stuff too, trying to get some more screens and microphones into a casual space so that there was much more physical presence for the remote people. And that's kind of the other thing that I'm trying to push more for as we move forward, is making sure that even in our physical space, my team has 5 people. We're in 4 states and 2 time zones. But if we have screens, if we have some way of being present in a physical space, that's a big get for us.
And Brad just said, thank you, Brad, that the DoorDash thing works well on the app, but not on the actual website. who knows DoorDash why you're doing that. But they did do it specifically for all these remote teams. Like it's part of a business program that they have.
I also wanted to add, we also have a random channel in our Slack, but we found that the limits of the random channel were not large enough to accommodate the critters. So we have a separate critters channel now as well.
Oh yeah, pets channel is the best channel.
And
Yes,
since
actually, I will say that people from other units want to join our Slack just for our critters. So.
Also, since babies were shared over, and I've caught up now over in Slack, we also did things like virtual baby showers. It's a thing. We have some fun games we can share if anyone. So, you know, taking that time and recognizing that you can have celebrations for your team remotely. I think this is actually, it's weird to say that the pandemic was a good thing, but I do feel like this is one area where we've all gotten a lot better sort of in our whole organization at being remote from each other. But it also makes me really appreciate now being able to see people in person even more. So I look forward to an in-person Connect next year.
All right, well, thank you all for sharing your thoughts and your experiences. I feel like I learned things. I hope you all learn from each other, and I hope the community has learned from you all as well. And I think, Carolyn, do you want to, I don't know what's going on with the break, so I'll leave it up to you to say that.
No, thank you all. That was great. It was, yeah. Anyway, I was participating on the Connect channel a lot too, because it's an exciting topic. We have a break now, and because we are running late, we are just going to move the break 10 minutes from when it was on schedule. So we will resume at 40 past the hour. So you have about 14 minutes to have a break.
Hey, Carolyn.
Oh, hi.
Mic check worked. Okay, cool.
Yes, we can hear you just fine. Do you want to share your screen?
No, I'll wait.
Okay. All right, welcome back, everyone. I think we will just get started right away because we don't want to be late for our birds of a feather. So introducing David, who's going to talk about Agile as whatever we made it to be.
Thanks, Carolyn. First of all, I just want to say what an awesome panel that was just before, and I think it fits really well with this. So with no further ado, I'm David Schober. I'm the repository development team lead at Northwestern. I'm also the product owner of our repository and digital collections products at Northwestern. A lot of you have probably also heard me speak as product owner of Avalon Media Systems. I a couple of years ago peeled off of that role. Prior to coming to the library world, I manage web products for organizations like the Poetry Foundation, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and Rotary International. Our team currently focuses a lot of its attention on a preservation-first digital asset management system and repository called Meadow. Some of you have heard me talk in the past and have even brought it up and wondered out loud whether our approach to Agile and the way that we work is only possible because we're working on a greenfield application. But it's taken me a lot of thought, and I really think that our evolving Agile processes and us continually changing how we work is in fact the thing that brought our approach to or led us to a greenfield application. So I thought it might be kind of fun to talk about this. I also think maybe just take a pause here, and the title of this presentation might need a little bit of explanation, but I had the after lunch slot, so I thought it'd also be nice to have a little fun with the presentation. As you know, I talk a lot about Agile processes and what works and what doesn't, and why I believe that Agile methods are a way of not only make better software, but also better teams and probably in the long term, better people if you do it right. And one day I was talking to an old friend, and he's a fellow product owner at another organization, and he just flat out said he didn't think Agile worked anymore. And he talked about how his team was reporting out to him, and how his bosses wanted to see kind of constant improvements in velocity, and how everyone just seemed burned out. And immediately I quipped, Agile is whatever we made it to be. It's a paraphrase of an old paraphrase from a gentleman named D. Boone, who was the lead singer of a band called the Minutemen, California. He led that band until untimely death at 27, and it ended up on stickers and guitars, and it rolled around my head for a long time, and really kind of shaped, I think, how I think about the world a lot. Side note, for those of you following along on Spotify, all these slide titles are in fact old Minutemen songs. Some reason my slides aren't advancing. One second. Here we go. All right, and just before I get started, I want to thank my team. At the end of the day, Agile is really about having a team willing to do the work necessary to continually improve. And I have a team that's always been willing and helpful and always puts a hand up. So we got Michael Klein as our technical lead, who you've heard speak just yesterday. Karen Shaw, Brendan Quinn, and Adam Arling and Matt Jordan run the front end side of things. And Veronica Robinson is our digital asset coordinator. Karen Shaw is also our Scrum lead, so she should rightfully take a lot of credit, I think, for the innovations over the last couple of years. For some of us that have been on Agile teams for a long time, it may be hard to remember why we started this in the first place. Agile was a response to the dominant trend in software and project management generally, of waterfall project management. This isn't meant really to be a history lesson on the history of project management, so I won't dig too deep. But for those of you that have never practiced it on a team, the main problem was one of overhead and assumptions. Basically, you broke a large project down into a series of phases, and each phase had to be completed and fed into the next phase. So you had a requirements phase, a systems design phase, an implementation phase, a formal testing phase, a formal deployment phase, and then a maintenance phase. And then if you needed to start something again, you had to restart and constitute a new project. Or as I like to think about it, or thought about it on the various waterfall teams I was on, you sat down and you tried to imagine everything you might ever need and write it down. And then you did what you wrote down. When you didn't get what you want, you pointed at the document, and then you repeated the process over. At the end of the day, it led to a lot of frustration for developers, for managers, for the people using the software. And we ended up with very rigid processes that just didn't feel right. So in the very early 2000s, a group of people got together, software developers got together, and in reaction to this said, we know what we're doing. And so the Agile Manifesto is really a simple set of principles that said, hey, we know what we're doing, so let us build the software. Tell us what we want to build and let us get to work. And really it came down to a set of 4 basic principles: that individuals and interactions mattered more than processes and tools. Working software mattered more than comprehensive documentation. Customer collaborations and working with people mattered more than contract negotiation. And finally, responding to change trumps following a plan. So this little Agile manifesto really resounded with me, in part because I was in my high school years, was an old punk rock kid, and it sounded a lot like what we thought about and what we talked about. So back in those days, we used to say small was far better than big and expensive. That people dancing on a floor were just as important, maybe more important than the band that was playing. And sometimes things got really confusing, but you just worked it out in the end. And you never knew exactly when someone was going to jump on stage and knock over a drummer. So the core principles were very reasonable, and a lot of people really felt, I think, and myself included, that this was the right way to move forward. And like a lot of things that resound with people, an industry was built around it pretty quick, because people, again, were looking for a way to solve a project management problem, a simple way. So I read, and out of that, basically, we ended up with a lot of books and a lot of documentation about the proper way to run an agile team. And I don't mean to be hard on any of these books. I've read a lot of them. There's a lot of great ideas in them. But at the end of the day, a lot of people ended up feeling is that if things weren't working out exactly right, it was probably a problem of the methodology or their team, rather than the fact that the specific parts within this methodology, maybe they just needed to flex more and go back to the core. So for the next few slides, I'm going to talk about how Northwestern has settled into an agile practice that I think really works for us. I'm not going to say it's the right way to do it for everybody. And I'm going to focus on the team a lot because, again, I think that that's at the core of all these principles, is that the team matters more than the process, and the process needs to flex around the team in order to make the team most effective. So the first, and I don't think there's going to be anything earth-shattering here, but we have about we break our work up into 8 to 10 week cycles. And we do that because it's a very sort of human way to think about work and to think about calendars. And each of those cycles we break up into 2-week sprints. We do retros all of the time at the end of every 2-week sprint. There's a big demo at the end, but we release all the time and we show things all the time and do mini demos all the time. Then we have something called a spin down for experiments. So that's sort of the general framework. But right now I want to unpack at least the cycle just a little bit. Originally, we started with really short cycles, around 4 weeks. And that really worked and allowed us to move really quick through a lot of different experiments and concepts when we're moving early on. But we expanded it out to around 8 to 10 weeks just because it really allowed us to sort of stretch out a little more and build out what we were doing. At the beginning of every cycle, we spend a good week talking through what we want to get done. And the goal of that is to come up with a paragraph, which you see over here on the right, that in very human terms talks about what we're going to do. And we all talk about that paragraph all the time. So at the beginning of every sprint, we sit down and we say, what are we trying to do this cycle again? And we read it out loud. We make tweaks to it. And we get to work. I also use that paragraph to explain to Carolyn, my boss, what we're going to be working on for the week. So everybody really is literally on the same page. And then outside of that, we then break our work out into really just a simple bulleted list. We don't go through the formal process of sort of having feature epics with formal issues through it at this point. We just write a big list of what we want to do, because lists can move. People don't get as attached to lists, I think, as they do with a formal process of epics. Talk a little bit about the issues themselves. So after we've set up and organized what we want to get done in the cycle, we have to issue out our work. And our issues are purposefully lightweight. We all write them. It's not just a product owner's job. It's not just a service owner's job. Every developer on the team writes them, and they expand or shrink depending on what it is that the issue is describing. So our goal is to always have these issues be as small as simply written as they can be. Sometimes they need to be a full spec. Other times it needs to be a screenshot with a big red arrow that says do this thing. And again, the goal is never to fall into a formality about what an issue is with a formal done looks like even. I mean, we tend to put a couple of checkboxes to say done looks like, but those themselves are fairly informal. On complex problems that we can't describe easily in an issue, we sometimes have a fairly short issue that describes the problem and put the entire team on it. And I've been really a big proponent too of even budgeting points around that, just to get a rough estimate for what we're talking about. And this final part, I think is maybe the most important thing to remember. And this really even goes back to my friend's criticism of Agile, is that points aren't for the management. They never were supposed to be. Points are about the team communicating with each other about relative complexity of work so that we can guess what we might be able to get done. And that's really all that they were ever supposed to be. And the second that they became a measurable tool with which to push the team farther, I think something went terribly wrong. So that is something that I'm fairly serious about. Points are really about the team. It's about us communicating with each other so that we can make sure we're moving in the right direction. And if things get too complex, they also act as a nice beacon. This final part, or the last step, and this again is just normal Scrum and Agile, I think, but and I heard a lot of great talk about how important retros were in the last talk as well. So how we handle them is sometimes maybe a little bit different. Retros are critical. I mean, retros work only when the team makes them work. So I have been on other teams where retros, got very stale and very boring, and people were checked out. So the next part is having great Scrum lead matters. So if things aren't working right, it's important for the manager on the team, product owner, to talk to the Scrum lead and figure out where we can change things. Small actionable items really are critical. So out of our retros, we're always trying to get small actionable items, and then we experiment and even retro the retro, as it were. One thing that's really come out is we've started to pass around the person that leads the retro. It acts as a way, or the person that coordinates and leads the retro, it really acts as a way to protect against that the rest of the team sort of checks out and people are listening, or people are just going through the steps. When you know that you have to come up with a fun and creative retro and lead it, you know how hard it is. And you're also much more willing, I think, to never just sort of back down and check out. So we've done everything from plus deltas to column-based games, which a lot of folks have done. We've written personal readmes and shared them with each other as if we were pieces of software code. We've done like pick the movie sprints, pick the sprint that the movie most felt like, which is a really fun one. We even did an online escape room game that maybe taught us a little bit about how we worked with each other in a way that we didn't expect. So again, it speaks back to just like, look for ways to have fun with this and for ways to shake it up when things feel a little stale. And it's really important, I think, that the team owns the retro. That's the little bullet here about that they kick me out if they kick me out if they need to. So I'm a product owner, but I'm also a manager, which in formal Scrum never happens, but in everyday life happens all of the time. So I early on had told my team that that it's really important for them to feel like if they don't want me there for whatever reason, because they need to hash something out, they can kick me out and there's no feelings about it. And they've done it many times. And often they come back with something to me. They don't tell me what happened. It goes anyway. It's really a matter of building trust too. So I feel that is a critical trust building exercise, to know that the manager doesn't have to be in the room if you are the PO and manager type of person. The last one here is that you have to resist the belief that you're going, or resist the urge to retro all of the things. Sometimes people need declare error, and that's okay, but it's really important, I think, to keep retros fairly scoped. We do a lot of performing, and I call it performing on purpose. We do a lot of demos, and this sort of goes from the smallest type of demo we do to the largest. Throughout our sprints, we picked up this concept of shoulder taps. I don't remember who on the team originally called it out, but it was this idea. It's a way for us to share information mid-sprint with a mini demo. So it happens usually after stand-up, and anybody on the team has the ability to call out anybody else and just ask them to show what they're working on midstream. The idea there is that it's a way to share out information and even like get feedback from people before you're done. It's a little different than than pairing, which we do a lot of pairing as well. So it's more sort of cross-functional sharing. We do team demos at the end of every sprint. These we've turned into a non-public demo, and that was on purpose because we found we were spending a lot of time trying to create a great demo. So our 2-week demos are small and informal and just the team. We do regular hallway demos with people who ask for features or who we need input on features to keep that feedback loop very tight. We also do regular demos and training. So that's more formal and how our software works or how patrons can use our software. And then the final one, and this is, I think unique to, at least I haven't worked on a team that's done this. We do large formal public demos at the end of every cycle. So these last about an hour. We pick one person from the team to do it. It gives them experience both presenting if they haven't done that before, but it also really formalizes the story of our product over time. So these are recorded. We invite everybody from the library. We have a pretty regular, folks come regularly. Around 50 people or so have been coming pretty regularly for a couple of years now. And the final bit that that we do at the end of every cycle is we take a full 2 weeks and we spin down. And at first this sounded really scary to a lot of people, or to myself even, like, how are we going to get all the work done? There's always too much work to do. But this unstructured time allows the team to not only take a breather from the sort of formal grind of a sprint, but it also allows them to fill in with personal training, fun experiments, like playing and exercising out an idea that they just didn't feel like was worth even putting together into a real formal issue. And at the end, we demonstrate. Even if it's just a little bit of training that you've done, you sort of talk through the book you read. And we found this unstructured time is really critical to both how we work and critical to our innovation. Sort of like our own little Bell Labs, I think of it as. Spin downs, like I said, we're not structured, but we've out of them have come some of our real big ideas, things like serverless IIIF. We've been working on a color searching aggregation experiment, so ways to do color, use color as a search tool itself, like the actual color. Preservation step functions, which we've presented on before. Bloom, which was our IIIF slider, we call it IIIF slider, it's which Matt Jordan has experimented on. I believe Valkyrie Shine came out of one of those, but I had to verify that with Brendan. And DevStack has come out of that. It came out of that as well, which we've since moved on from. All right, so I'm at time, so I'll run through this real quick. I'm not going to say that we've figured it all out. In fact, that's my whole point, is that there isn't really a way to figure it all out. I think that ultimately what you have to do is just radically trust your team, and then technology will transform itself, right? Process changes the tech and vice versa. And these things are constantly in interplay. We also found at Northwestern that a really cool part of this was that the team itself got bigger. So before we thought of the dev team as our team. And this really allowed us, in particular, because of demos and a lot of hallway conversations, to grow what that team meant and was. You also, I think, have to meet the team where they are, not where you want them to be. And this kind of falls into the next one, which is that every structural change means you have a new team. So if you're leading up a team, when you add a new player or when someone leaves, you now have a new team. So it's really important, I think, to check in and figure out if your processes are still working. And ultimately, when the team really feels trusted, they're going to tell you when things aren't working. And the final bit is when things get stale, shake them up a little bit. Maybe someone will fall into a drummer, because that always helps shake things up. And that's it. That's what I got today. Some of our repos are here. I didn't want to go too deep into each of our repos, but I don't know if I have any time for questions, maybe 1 minute, but I'm happy to answer them asynchronously if not.
Yeah, you have a minute. I think we can take an extra minute or two.
Sure. Are they in Q&A, or I see the channel going?
There's a lot of
Q&A. Okay, I'll just try to scan real quick.
David, did you talk about the experimentation? I know you kind of mentioned the spin downs, but did you give the example? I kind of missed it.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, that many of our innovations came right out of those spin downs that were very unstructured in nature at the beginning and then built up. If there's a question, somebody you want to put it right now in one of the QAs if they can? I'm sorry, there's a lot of chatter, so it's hard to see if there's a question. Instead of points, 1 to 2 days. Yes, Jonathan.
Anna asked a question. Do you see it? What happens if at the end of the cycle you
Yeah.
don't finish the tickets?
I see one from Tim real quick that just popped into Q&A. How do people balance multiple projects in a small team? For us, you know, we've slowly focused more and more of our attention on one big project. That was in part on purpose, but we still have multiple repositories. And I think in part, we stopped thinking about projects. And I know it's going to sound weird, but we think of the repositories as a large product with a lot of interconnecting parts. So I think that was really a shift for me, and I think the team, is that what we're really doing is running and moving products forward. And at any given time, we might want to lean into one product or another. I don't know if that made sense. It sounded a little fuzzy, but I think there's a nuanced difference between a project, which has a start and a finish, and running products, which you're constantly trying to improve and sell to your internal clients.
And David, will you answer Anna's?
Which one?
Anna had a question. What happens if at the end of
Yeah.
a cycle you didn't finish the ticket?
We talk about it a little bit, and then we carry them over to the next cycle. If it's like an obvious trend, you know, then we start asking, like, what are we missing? Do we need to learn more about something? And often, I think more often than not, that's what happens. So like if we jumped into, I'm just going to throw out, like if we jumped into step functions and we thought it was going to be a fairly straightforward transition of some of our code over to step functions, and it became way bigger than we expected in the middle of it, we might pause and say, is it that we don't know enough? So then we'll write new tickets and we'll break it up differently. And we'll write new tickets about what we need to learn. You know, does that get at the heart of what you're asking about? Largely, we throw away tickets if they stop making sense. That's another thing we do all the time. Tickets are just little pieces of paper we can throw away.
All right, well, I don't want to push the birds of feather off too much. Thank you so much, David. There's definitely a lot of chatter. Check it out.
Yep.
And
Happy to continue.
And we will start our birds of a feather now. Just a quick reminder, birds of a feather there's 4 to choose from. You can see them in the schedule, and they all have their own Zoom meeting links. So head over there, pick the one you would like to attend, and we will see you tomorrow for our final day of Connect. Bye, everyone.